It's crazy how Goblin, a very weird goblin, tries to navigate his way through the jungle world and the ugly cave that is now his new home. He later begins to acquire new skills by hunting and eating monsters. However, before this happens, Goblin, whose name was Kaneda in his first world, was brutally isekai'd by some ugly-looking creature. However, little did he know that there is more torture for him as he surprisingly reincarnates, not as a human, but as a very disgusting goblin. On the first day of his rebirth, he opens his eyes slowly to a very odd environment and sees that he has just woken up among goblin babies, and he is not an exception. He is also a baby goblin. In reaction to this dreadful event, he cries very loudly with regret. However, an old man who happens to be their guard and parent stuffs his belly with irritating maggots to fill his stomach and keep his mouth shut, as well as the other baby goblins. He eventually gives Kaneda the name Goblin, while he also names the other babies like Gobkichi and a few others. On the second day, still with the ugly green babies, he scampers for survival with his tiny hands and body, while the rest are asleep. On the third day, he is shocked to see that he has already grown into a young teenage goblin, but still ugly. It appears that goblins grow way faster than normal. He stretches his arms and legs and walks out of the goblin's cave. While this happens, other goblins have also grown into teenagers as they examine their new bodies. On the fourth day, their old guardian serves them maggots, claiming that it is the last food they will get from him, as they are now grown and capable of getting their food by themselves. Following this, they collect the maggots and begin to eat like crazy dogs that have been starved for days. Having eaten to their death, Goblin sets out of the cave and is first welcomed by the morning sunlight, and because he is not used to this in the new world, he blocks his eyes with his hand. Meanwhile, Gobkichi, who had been following him all along, also sees the outside world. Here, Goblin observes his environment, where he sees his single sun and a blue sky, coupled with creepy birds flying around. He also sees some strange plants he does not recognize. He notices Gobkichi is also observing and then decides to team up with the biggest of the goblin kids to hunt wild animals. That same day, they both set out to hunt and end up striking a little one-horned rabbit. However, after killing it, Gobkichi begins to salivate and tries to eat the game alone. Seeing this, Goblin beats him black and blue, bringing him to his senses and making him understand that the meat should be shared and not eaten alone by the big-for-nothing glutton. Having fainted after the torture, Goblin tries to find a way to create a weapon using the horn he had acquired from the rabbit. However, he is shocked to find out that he had acquired a new level just by hunting down the rabbit and seizing its horn to make a weapon. At this time, Gobkichi has already exhausted the saliva in his mouth just because lunch is delayed. Goblin finally gives him the chance to stuff his stomach with the raw meat. He cries and eats at the same time. Goblin, who is disgusted by this, tells him to either eat or keep crying like a fool. On the fifth day, he uses the weapon he had created from the previous hunt to kill another rabbit with a single horn. Having acquired a new level from eating and making a new weapon from the rabbit, they retire for the day. On the sixth day, after Goblin tells Gami, a female goblin who had managed to be a little above ugly,
emotional damage,
she seems very excited as she clings to him like a perverted baby. She ignores the big-for-nothing Gobkichi and keeps talking about how amazing her newfound crush is. Goblin promises to take her for the next hunt, which makes her very happy. However, they are eventually unable to hunt on the seventh day as there is a heavy downpour of rain. They then postpone the adventure to the day after that. Goblin sees this opportunity to check out new weapons. However, he is shocked to his bones as he sees a group of clothless women, but there was nothing he could do to help them. Later that day, when he is trying to build a new weapon, Gobji, his old guardian, notices that he seems rather motivated. Following this, he tells Goblin that he may level up greatly if he continues with his skillful exploits. Having said this, he instructs Goblin to make a signal which surprisingly shows him his level at the time. He has already attained level 86. Gobji then states that he will be able to evolve into a more advanced life form if he is able to attain level 100. Dare I say that goblins grow rather ridiculously as this ugly, short and very old man is only in his 20s. Gobji ignores his assessments and tells Goblin to brace himself as youngsters from the village will soon return. This will give him an opportunity to see what an evolved hobgoblin looks like. Having said this, he walked away from the hairless young boy. On the eighth day, Gobkichi and Goblin join forces with Gami, and the three combinations of goblins end up pulling off a crazy hunt. They kill and feast on different types of monsters. While they eat, they acquire a new ability which helps to resist venom. On the 9th and 10th day, they packed their gear and did the usual hunting, and on the 11th day, they made a silly mistake of doing some spelunking out of curiosity. And since curiosity is bound to kill the cat, they almost lost their legs from running for crazy bats that pursued them with tiny wings. However, at some point, Gobru manages to beat some of them with his weapon, and also ends up using his new acquired skill to wipe them off, and in the next minute, these silly goblins pack out many bats to have as breakfast. From eating the disgusting bats, Gobru obtains another ability. Meanwhile, the rest of the lazy goblins are dying of hunger. On the 12th day, while Gobru is sleeping, a pair of jealous goblins who had always stalked him during his hunt gang up to kill him. However, while his eyes are closed, he is still able to detect their presence. He quickly springs up to his feet, and in the next minute, some are injured while some stare in disbelief and regret. However, the moment Gobru tries to teach the rest of them a lesson, Gobmi shows up and almost pulls the head of one of them for hurting her man. Gobru, shocked by the way she handles them, tries to plead on their behalf. While this shenanigan ends, on the following day, they run across an orc in the jungle. It took a crazy effort from the 3 goblins to bring it to death, but they eventually got it killed, after which they settled down to have a great meal. They did not even pray before they munched their prey, and probably for Gobru. The most important thing is the skill that is acquired after eating the orc, which is the ability to detect things sharply and also the ability to use the orc language. However, for the first time, he suggests that they take the rest of the meat to their hungry family in the cave, lest they try to murder them again. They are first shocked to their bones, as they look on like a set of fools on seeing the bag full of meat that is placed before them. They munch on it like hungry dogs after confirming that it is their meal. While Gobru looks at them, he reflects on his selfish nature from his former world, and how he seems to have suddenly grown compassionate. Later that night, he sees a bunch of writing in his magic journal, and can only remember picking the yes option without understanding what it really was. After that, he went back to sleep uninterrupted. Meanwhile, unknown to him, he had received the blessing of the grand god of demise and origin, and on the 14th day, to his shock, he had grown bigger, handsome, and he now had numerous strands of hair on his head. He looks exactly like his old self in his former world, except that his ears are still ugly, and his body is now blue. Gobkichi had also grown into a fine tall goblin. On seeing them, Gobmi had so much difficulty hiding her excitement, as she was still the same, short and perverted. It is crazy how they both ranked so fast when they were born just a month ago. Following this, Gobkichi suggests that they both have a fight to determine the strongest. Gobru agrees to this and ends up beating him to it. Meanwhile, their fight is interrupted by the invasion of some crazy wolves who are eating up other monsters in the forest. Little did they know that they would be eaten up by their masters. Gobru ends up slaying them with his team and also takes the rest of them home for his goblin family. This is after he had eaten the leader of the wolf pack and had acquired leadership and military ability for himself. Later that day, while the little goblins express their gratitude, he promises to teach them how to hunt and acquire new levels. Having seen that they are happy, he is also happy and vows within himself to eat like crazy and keep acquiring new abilities. On the 17th day, Gobru wakes Gobji to see how the humans that had been held captive by the goblins for a long time had murdered themselves with poison. They had probably taken it because they had lost all hopes of living. Gobji and Gobru give them their last respect and then burn them up into ashes. Meanwhile, as the 26th day approaches, Gobru begins to train goblins for his generation. While doing this exercise, he also ate any promising enemy he could find to acquire new abilities. On a fateful afternoon, when he is training the goblins, a set of suspected creatures that also look like goblins begin to approach. Sensing that there might be great danger, Gobru draws out his sword to kill them as soon as they show their faces. However, he is quickly prevented by Gobji, who explains that the creatures he is trying to kill are the raiders and also his ancestors. He is startled as he wields his sword. Just after this, Gobji welcomes all of them, especially Hoboken, a huge and ugly ancestor who is also his most powerful raider. However, when he sees that they have captured new humans, women, for the intention of reproduction, he is not happy with how the beautiful damsels are treated. Apparently, a goblin's gene is so strong that they are bound to reproduce as goblins even when they mate with ordinary humans. Following this, he personally requests them to look after the captives. This annoys Hoboken so much that he is forced to lock his shirt and confront the newly born bastard. In response to this, scared that their so-called ancestor might hurt their benefactor. The other goblins draw their sword. Gobji is confused and helpless, and just as this happens, Hobseto and the mage Hobsi interrupt their brawl. However, the interruption is not to completely stop the brawl, as Hobseto suggests that each leader from their different generations have a fight, while the winner decides what is to be done with the village. Having pronounced that no weapons are allowed, Hoboken is eager to teach Gobru a lesson as the brawl begins, but guess what? It had just been 30 seconds into the fight and Hoboken is defeated and tied up with some string like a prisoner. He clearly regrets judging the newborn by appearance and height. Knowing that Gobru hadn't been around all day, Gobji asks him where he had been hiding all day. He ignores it and explains that the string he had used to tie his bloody ancestor was naturally acquired from his fingers. He had gotten the ability to produce sourced silk from the demon spider he had once consumed. While Hobseto and Hobsi commend his abilities, he is also declared as the official leader of the village. Although Hoboken and his friends are not happy about this, there is absolutely nothing to be done, and since he now has the right to command things, Gobru takes the captured women to a safe room and says that he has instructed every single goblin to not lay a finger on them. Rather, they are to be looked after. Having said this, they are so happy, and he also promises to get them out of the goblin village back to their own world. In a bid to repay his kindness, they promise to do anything he wants. However, he declares that he wants nothing deeper other than their human knowledge. It appears that they were part of a traveling business when the older goblins attacked them. The men were slaughtered, and the 5 women were the only survivors. On the 28th day, he serves the humans breakfast to ease their tension and distorted minds. However, instead of hunting on the 31st day, he focuses on training the older goblins, including Hopkin and his stubborn head. Later that night, Hopkin and his friends break into the room where the captives were kept just to have a good time with the succulent women. Gobru is alerted immediately and ends up slashing his huge body without the slightest mercy while he ties up the rest with his spider silk. While Hopkin struggles for his life and is near death, Gobkichi and Gami approach them. It is here that Gobru tells them to gather all the goblins as he is about to pass information across to them. Despite the heavy downpour of rain, everyone gathers at the entrance of the cave, and with this, Gobru ties Hopkin to a tree with his head downwards and his legs up, while he leaves the rest of them on the bare floor, still tied up. After explaining the rules of the cave to the rest, as punishment, he leaves them there till daybreak. However, because Hopkin is already badly injured and cannot survive the night, he dies before daybreak. On the 32nd day, they resume hunting as Gobru ends up killing a 3-horned horse. After eating it, he acquires new skills. Later that night, because she is scared to death about the incident that had happened the night before, one of the captivated women comes to lay beside Gobru, and on the 33rd day, he opens his eyes feeling so uncomfortable because Gami had already jealously squeezed herself into bed with them. They had both shared his 2 arms, using them as their pillow. As the days pass, they continue to grow in strength as Gobkichi is now the captain of their armored fighters while Gobmi runs the ranged unit. Hobseto, on the other hand, handles the mobility-oriented, lightly armored forces. Gob has also taken over a rear support, which mostly consists of assorted chores, and the village's only mage, Hobsi, is saddled with the responsibility of acting as the captain of their magic brigade. On a fateful day, he leaves them to train while he goes deeper into the woods to hunt a variety of prey. After killing a horse with a single strike, he goes deeper into the forest, and then he sees a part with blood spilled on the ground. It is at this time that he remembers Gobji telling them never to go deep into the forest, as there are massive crimson creatures called the Red Bear. Just as he tries to figure out what might be happening, he begins to hear heavy footsteps, and when he looks back to assess the situation, he stumbles upon a very large red bear. Following this, he stands guard instead of running, and with the intention of fighting, beating, and eating it, he attacks. Meanwhile, Gobbi wonders why he is not yet back at the cave. On his first attack, the beast shields it with its left arm. Despite losing its arm, it manages to block all of Gobru's attacks and even opens fire on the environment. While Gobji attacks its mouth and stops it from breathing fire, he tries to launch the last attack and ends up killing the beast but also loses his arm and his consciousness. Waking up in the forest on day 34, he manages to eat a part of the bear with his lost arm, and in an instant, he acquires the skill of overpowering strength and loses consciousness again. By the time he wakes up to return to the cave, Gobru had already grown into a hefty goblin. This is because he had defeated the master of the northern wood within a month when he was born and has now evolved from a goblin into an ogre. After Gobji stops his loose ranting, Gobru goes in the weapon chamber almost naked. This is because he had just increased in size and must get new clothes. Meanwhile, the other little goblins did not stop following him around like a mother hen. On seeing him, the women captives almost lost their minds. He feels a little hurt about his appearance, but feels better when they become calmer. Gami, on the other hand, keeps pinching his leg out of curiosity. He ignores her and goes to repair his weapon with one of the human captives who is also his blacksmith. Having told her to make another weapon for him, he pats her head as she reacts very happily. He examines every woman that has been held captive, and, after praising them for helping with their human intelligence, he teases some of them and says they would make a good wife. The red-headed captive spanks him on the head for being a pervert, and also because she loves him. Meanwhile, the alchemist with the captives have returned to crafting potions. Gobru goes to pay her a visit and notices that she is crafting poison. She explains that she had created the poisons for protection. However, since he had been good to her, she affirms that she does not have any intention of putting it in their food anymore. In response to this, he holds her waist,
bombastic side-eye,
and carries her up to match his height. Meanwhile, Gami and the red-haired human approach with an icy chill of a glare with killer intent. In the end, they all glue their bodies to him like a packet of glue, making happy noises. On the 36th day, he was not able to do his usual afternoon sparring. He ends up training with goblins who are at the verge of death just by receiving a single punch from his hard fist, and on that same day, Gobkichi's armor almost breaks, and then they end the training. Following this, Gobru heals the injured goblins immediately. While Gobkichi breathes heavily and angrily, Gobru inquires to know his problem, but he says he does not have any and then walks off to hunt. Gobru, suspecting that something is definitely wrong, looks at him consciously. Later that day, Gami and Hobsado go hunting together while Gob mines the cave for spirit stones. While this is going on, the short-haired redhead focuses on her personal training. Meanwhile, Gobru is knitting a dress with the village mage. They both talk about Gobkichi, and after asking her for his book, she ignores him and focuses on something else. In the process of pestering and disturbing her peace, Gobji walks past them with his ugly walking stick. For the first time in a while, Gobru is able to have a peaceful day. On the 37th day, after their lunch, Gob alerts him about her noise. It happened that she had found a carbuncle covered in blood. The moment she brings the carbuncle to him, he tries healing her. Gob then explains how she was just digging through the wall when the creature fell out. Seeing that she had lost a lot of blood, Gobru says he would get something from the alchemist to help her. Later that day, the carbuncle wakes up after treatment, and having asked them to know how they found her, she opens up to them and thanks them for saving her. Having said this, she introduces herself as a returner and says she has been attacked by some humans a while ago. Gobru then notices that the gem on her forehead is worth a lot of money, and this is why greedy humans are probably after her life. She then pleads with Gobru to help her chase off the adventurers. It turns out that Return is an artificial carbuncle, who was created a long time ago by a legendary mage called Velvet. She is then made the guardian of his old treasury. However, the core that keeps her alive was damaged badly by the greedy humans, which does not guarantee that she will have a great lifespan. However, the hidden treasury is filled with all kinds of legendary items that Velvet had acquired in his lifetime. After promising him treasures from the treasury, Gobru agrees to help her. However, he promises his human friends not to hurt the humans as he only intends to negotiate with them or chase them away. With this, he sets out into the cave with Gobkichi and the rest. On getting to the place, he instructs them to hide so that they do not appear scared while he finds the adventurers himself. He had barely walked deep into the dungeon when they approached him with crazy glares in their faces. Admitting to him quickly, they attack him rudely until his patience wears out. Now that his anger is unleashed, and after pleading with them to leave the treasury and their vehement refusal to succumb, he summons his team, and they begin to teach the stubborn men a lesson for not being reasonable and for insulting his appearance. After beating them black and blue and stripping them of everything they had acquired, Gobru and his team split their belongings into two places. Having looted the looters, they acquire new levels of magic and also a new magic box that can contain 99 copies of 1,200 different items. However, instead of keeping some items, Gobru eats them. With this, he acquires the ability to concealment status. After their mission is completed, they are led to the treasury in the deepest chamber, where they are gifted with a lot of treasures, after which the carbuncle disappears and Gobru, is left with his gem, which he swallows. After a moment of silence for the carbuncle, they retrieve the items in the magic box, and then, instead of returning to the cave just yet, Goblin decides to cremate Velvet's dead body, which is still seated on the chair. However, the moment he cremates it, it becomes a new weapon, which Goblin wears without delay. Little did he know that it was dangerous until he was pierced all over the body and binded forcefully by spider webs for just a minute. After that, he realizes that Velvet is just giving him abilities that will no longer be needed by his dead body. He happens to have acquired an arm that can rotate and transform at will, along with producing poison and string. It also works well as a natural arm would work. Having completed the quest, Goblin announced that they would be having a party. Following this announcement, they begin the party immediately. On the 38th day, Goblin begins to assess their collection with the blacksmith. On the next day, they resume hunting with each person handling a weapon. Goblin had successfully provided magic items to 15 hobgoblins and had also taken a special spear for himself and 3 legendary artifacts. Later that day, they gathered the ingredients for a bear stew as they easily hunted down a very large bear, with everyone using their weapons, after which they settled down to eat a delicious stew. However, in all of these, Goblin notices that the red-haired girl did not do any fighting. On the 40th day, they set out to have a series of battles to determine the hobgoblins' ranks and, in the end, everyone leveled up nicely. With this, Goblin suggests that they form a mercenary company. On the 41st day, early that morning, Goblin heads into the mountains to pursue his unseen prey. The first prey to be killed is a golden spider, which he eats and acquires a new ability. After nursing a stupid ambition to become a fashion designer with the website he had acquired, he bumps into a red deer with antlers that looks very attractive. On seeing him from a distance, the unfortunate monster comes running in his direction and ends up getting slain and eaten. Later that evening, he finds a tree bathing in sunlight with a race of different creatures. Here he finds a girl without clothes. Apparently, she is a species of creature who finds an attractive and intelligent race of men to sleep and feast on them. However, with Goblin, it is different because, after a series of seductions, he ends up unleashing his libido and ends up firing her till sunset.
What?
Having satisfied his urges, he returns to the cave disoriented. Goblin and the remaining girls, who have now learned of what has happened, begin to give him weird attitudes. He eventually figures out the reason for their jealousy as he ends up making up for his actions. They all request that he services them through the night. Left with no choice, he builds a soundproof door, insert "wait a minute" meme, and takes all of them into his room. Gobkichi comes to search for Goblin, but he is told that the master is very busy for the day. On the 44th day, Goblin wakes up from his honeymoon and discovers that his abilities have been improving gradually, and he is not able to identify different races of people. Just as he tries to get out of bed, he is alerted by the visitation of some elves. They announce their entrance rather rudely, blaming the goblins and calling them pitiful for attending to their boss very late. Goblin does not say any single word as he watches the elf master and patiently waits for him to finish spilling rubbish from his godforsaken mouth. He had come to plead for the support of the goblins as humans are taking their territory in the forest. Gobji agrees to help them because they share a common feeling against humans. However, having accepted their rude approach, Goblin declined their request, saying he does not feel like helping them. The boss of the elves finds this habit rather rude and irritating, and in response to this, he mobilizes his men to attack the goblins. However, before they can harm them, Goblin seizes all of them and also threatens to kill their boss if his hidden archers do not surrender. Having shown them hell, he releases the neck of their boss, which he had held on to all this while. Scared to death, they run for their lives. On the 45th day, Goblin is out in the field hunting down slimes and swallowing their core to obtain more power. After eating 20 cores, he retires for the day. On the next day, he weaves traveling clothes for Goblin and the other girls, also adding his bloodlines to them. This is to alert him whenever they are in trouble. Meanwhile, the elves do not seem to have learned their lesson as they show up again on the 47th day, this time for the lesson of their lives. Goblin, seeing that their boss is adamant like a goat, ends up tying them up and killing the arrogant fool. After so much pleading, he agrees to let them go only if they fight his own armored men. The rule is to let anyone who wins go home safe. However, at the end, despite being able to save themselves, Goblin still decides to hold them captive. Gobji, on the other hand, pleads to sleep with their girls as his pendulum is almost killing him. After so much persuasion, Goblin treats the old man to fresh blood. Meanwhile, Gobkichi keeps working on himself, and this surprisingly pays off on the 46th day, when he suddenly appears very red and big with increased muscles. Having acquired many levels, he challenges Gobju to a fight, just to determine his strength. However, in the end, Gobju ends up beating him in a stupor. On the 51st day, Gob takes him to see other goblins who have also evolved to a new level. Here, he sees Hobsy, who has evolved into a great magician and a beautiful woman overnight. Following this, they go out in the fields to test her abilities, and here, he sees that she will soon become a magic lord. Seeing that everyone seems to grow in skills and stature because of his influence, he is delighted. However, there are also some lazy ones who did not grow up so luckily. On the next day, while he has gone hunting with his team, he is shocked to see lazy goblins who have not grown in height and skills sneaking out of the village. However, having heard their plight and their desire to move forward, he gives them the permission to leave and even gives them a very powerful weapon. On day 53, while hunting in the woods, he sees a human who has just been killed by an orc. This crazy man kills the orc with a single strike and also ends up eating the man and the orc. He had eaten the man just so that his meat and ability would not go to waste. When he returns to the cave that day, he is welcomed by the alchemist, who had made him a very powerful position. He places his large hands on her tiny cannons, thanking her for such good deeds. On the 54th day, he summons everybody and tells them the situation of things and how the goblins who emerged from the generation before theirs had just left the village. He asks anyone who wants to leave to signify he will not stop them. Rather, they will be gifted and relieved of their duties. Seeing that no one raised their hands, he closes the case and tells them to make merry with him. On the 55th day and beyond, things appear to be very peaceful as Gobru worked on producing earrings with his own blood in them. These are to act as communication devices, and on the 56th day, they began testing the equipment. And from that day to the 60th day, they continued exploring and killing more animals. The red-haired girl has also improved in her fighting skills and is now saddled with the assignment of killing as many bears as possible. On a fateful day, he is able to use his skills of subduing monsters on a wild horse that Gob had hunted without killing him. Having done this, they acquire many more monsters to join their goblin family, and Gobju is saddled with the sole responsibility of watching after them and healing their wounds despite being edible. They are now mostly seen as his soldiers. This is emphasized when he saves them from an invasion of skeleton beings. This had happened because they had dug a secret place in the treasury in the cave by mistake, hence letting the skeleton and their master loose. However, Gobju and his friends end up taking them down within a short time frame of 10 seconds. Having seen this, the bears bow to him and call him their lord even against his personal will. On the 61st day, Gobju goes hunting with Gobkichi. After a long time on their way back, they run into 12 humans who were sent to kidnap the daughter of the elven lord. However, instead of saving the situation, Gobju merely stands back and watches as they kill many of her poor guards from a distance, and he does not move an inch until she is seized from her carriage and made to lose consciousness. In a bid to help her and save his conscience, he comes out of hiding and seizes the crazy humans at once. Gobkichi ends up carrying all of them back to the cave in spider webs, while Gobju personally looks after the princess elf. Having heard of the new creature, Gobji goes to Gobju with his restless pendulum and begs him to give him a chance to service the elves. However, in response to this, Gobju refuses. Later that night, after getting the necessary information from the 12 humans, he had each of them for dinner, and ends up acquiring all their skills for himself. On the next morning, when the princess elf has finally regained consciousness, she screams loudly as the first person she sees happens to be Gobju in his scary face. She had also screamed so loudly because she thought he was a pervert. Having calmed her down, he explains this to her, and they both agree to visit the elf village the next day. She had first blamed him for watching her guards die and had called him ruthless, but he spanks her head and tells her that they have no issues with humans like goblins, and perhaps she should look into one of the elves who seem to be a traitor to them, serving the humans. After confirming that the humans will be attacking in 20 days, they set out to the elves' village. On arriving there, they are first almost killed by the hidden archers, but the princess elf stops them, claiming that they have saved her life. Having seen this, they lead Gobkichi and Gobju into the elven palace, where the king shows his gratitude for saving his daughter. However, Gobju decides to be very blunt with him, and then goes on to tell him that he had not saved his daughter out of free will. Little did he know that the stupid ogre was just testing him to see how much he valued his daughter and to understand his nature. The king presents the greatest family treasure to him as a gift, which he refuses and apologizes for testing them. To make up for this, Gobju gives him information about the invasion of humans coming to their territory and to show appreciation for their hospitality. He also gifts them with weapons to fight. Following this, the king sees them off, but he asks about the head soldier of the elves that have been sent to make peace with the goblins and also asks for their help. Recognizing the stupid elf as the disrespectful one he had killed a few days ago, he lies about not seeing him to not ruin their new legal relationship. Having said this, the king gifts them with their best liquor, and while Gobju tastes it, he is very delighted and tells them to reach out for help. The fool even promises to give them a discount out of happiness. He returns to the cave with a lot of liquor to share with his family and the captured elves. While this is done, they begin to prepare weapons to face the humans. On the 65th day and beyond, they begin to hunt down different animals and also create new weapons from them. Also, because they have evolved as ogres, Gobju changed their names. Gobju is now referred to as Ogre, while Gobkichi now bears Ogrekichi, and because Gob has acquired earth powers, she is referred to as Earthy, while Gobmeat is to bear them, because she has also evolved into a beautiful, charming damsel. On a fateful day, Ogrekichi summons Ogre to have a talk with him. This is regarding Earth, who is now very beautiful. He tells Ogre about how much he loves her and how he is clueless about making it known to her. However, instead of helping him out directly, he tells Ogrekichi to summon courage and tell her exactly how he felt that night. Meanwhile, he had also secretly gone to convince Thami to speak to her friend on behalf of his own friend. Later that night, things get rather easier for Ogre, who confesses his feelings and does not get rejected. On the next morning, he trains pretty well with Ogre, and even almost kills him out of the excitement from the night before. Meanwhile, the humans are now beginning to threaten the elves. In response to this, the king sends them to Ogre's cave to ask for assistance. Ogre promises to help them, and immediately they leave. He summons everyone in the cave and announces that it is time to begin their first mission. Everyone happens to be very excited and to crown this, he declares them an official group of fighters and also gives them a name called Parabellum. With this, every single person prepares to save the elves from human invasion. On the 71st day, they are now stationed and prepared for war. The human army is now finally advancing on the Kudo Woods. Ogre remembers the words of the elf messenger, who says that their contract will be considered void in the event of a retreat from the goblins. They move in power and might to carry out their first mission as a family of fighters led by Ogre. Having set out very early on that day, they are quick to locate humans in their hideout. Meanwhile, on getting to the hideout, they first notice a barrier. Hobseto, whose name has now changed to Bloodseto, is the first to notice this barrier. She now bears Bloodseto because she can make deadly weapons using blood. Following her observation, Ogre breaks the barrier with his powers as they now have a clear view of humans. Earth and the others are stationed around them as they begin to destroy them without delay. Meanwhile, Ogre, who is on his familiar, a bear, sees that the commander of humans is a female. This female aims straight to pierce his chest, but her efforts are abortive. Having seen this, he challenges her to a brawl, but says he wants her alive. She accepts the challenge after affirming that he can do whatever he wants if he defeats her. Having said this, he instructs his goblins to kill everyone else except a few humans who will be useful. The fight then begins in earnest. However, as the fight begins, humans face a terrible humiliation as many of them are dead. Ogre had also defeated their commander. However, he says he has no intention of killing her as he takes her alive. This is because he is distracted by her body figure and courage. After their victory, they all return to the cave without delay. On getting to the cave, they tie down the people they had captured, simply because they are bloody criminals. After this, Ogre then goes to celebrate his victory with the king of the elves and his people. Having drunk enough wine, he finds his way to the female commander he had captured earlier. On the 72nd day, they all begin to work harder on how to take on the next batch of humans. That same day, the boulders which had been enchanted went after those who fought and fled equally, and the 500 troops of humans were reduced to 300 in an instant. After this, some goblins led by Thami fire them in crazy waves, and even if they cannot kill all of them, they fall into pits that are surrounded by goblins. This caused them to be reduced to 100. Following this, Ogre notices a knight in steel armor giving orders and sees that he is very intelligent. Having injured and killed many of his soldiers, he instructs Ogrekichi to fight the knight. After much trial, he defeats the knight. However, Ogre admires the fact that this did not come in handy, as the knight is able to defend himself for a long time before his final defeat. Because of this, he decides to take him to the cave as he might be useful. Later that day, the prisoners reflect on their captivity except the knight, who does not seem to feel bad about it. He speaks about their hospitality and how they give them food to eat. Following this, Ogre leads him out for interrogation. It is here that he finds out that the humans are after a medicine that only the elves possess. This is because their princess had returned to the kingdom with a disease, and the king is very greedy that he had sent them out to get a cure forcefully from the elves. Following this, the knight tells him about his hatred for his town and the king's actions. He then tells Ogre that he prefers to stay in the cave than go back to his own kingdom. Ogre, seeing the passion in his eyes, sets him free from being a prisoner and immediately tries to fight him. After protecting him with a barrier and landing him several punches just for training, he treats the poor human immediately. Ogrekichi, seeing this, also says he would like to fight humans. Meanwhile, it happens just as it happened on the battlefield. It was quite hard for him to be defeated by Ogrekichi. Following this, he is made the personal commander of the red-haired human, to guide her and help her become excellent at combat. She looks at him inquisitively. On the next day, Ogre speaks to the king of the elves about the medicine. He then tells him that it was the initial gift they had offered him, and their value does not permit them to share it with humans. Having said this, he tenders the medicine to Ogre, who drinks it immediately. He acquires a new ability, and then tests it on one of the humans that was captured. Following this, he sees that his blood is very powerful, as a pint of it can now heal anybody of any disease. With this, Ogre begins to feel like some powerful god sent to deliver the earth from disaster. On the 81st day, which is a few days after the second battle with the human army, they begin to prepare themselves for the third battle. They had already found out about their location and distance from them. On the day of the battle, Ogre is the first to strike with his spear. This alerts the others, who stand guard immediately. However, his spear is so powerful that it can create other spears to strike people wherever it is stationed. In light of this, the spear attacks many other people. After this, Ogre gets some soldiers stuck in slimes. On the next day at the elves' village, Ogre visits the king with the two women that he had initially captured from the first battle. Although they are impatient and scared, he tries to calm them and also tells them that it is okay to meet with the elf king. Having said this, they await his arrival. Surprisingly, he arrives with different bottles of liquor, and even apologizes for keeping them on standby. The humans are shocked by his warm welcome, as they did not believe Ogre when he had told them that the king was quite different from some of his crazy subjects. When the kingdom arrives, he tells Ogre that they are tired of battle and would want to wrap it up quickly. That is why they need to send their next fighters quickly. Having heard this, he promises to grant the king of elves' demand. Meanwhile, on his way back to the cave, the female commander stops him to talk to him, and then pleads with him to get the medicine across to her people in exchange for her body and loyalty. However, it is a bit hard because it might disrupt the religious system of the elves. Also, he had been blessed with powers by the same gods, and this action might bring punishments upon him. However, irrespective of this, he stops halfway and promises to help her. On the next day, they quickly station their men for war very early that day. Ogre first releases a battalion of skeletons to attack the men who are on guard. However, even if the skeletons overpower them, they begin to melt away because it is already daybreak. Thankfully, Ogre had already prepared for this by injecting his blood into the skeletons so that they are protected from the effects of sunlight. Having wiped out all the men in an instant, they settle for the day. But this only happens after Ogre kills a beast he had found roaming the battlefield. While he settles down to enjoy his meal, he is interrupted by some crazy and powerful kid who later introduces himself as Filippo. Although he appeared playful, he is very powerful. Ogre had already assessed him and was aware of his abilities. Ogre had barely said a word when he opens some weird worms that were initially locked up in a jar to reincarnate the dead soldiers. They did not just begin to walk, they become crazy monsters and now cling themselves to Ogre's body just to suck his blood. After some minutes, while Filippo thinks that is the end, Ogre slams the irritating creature off his head and then faces Filippo for the worst, and the worst indeed comes thereafter. Seeing that his little pets did not do justice to the situation, he releases a very wild and crazy monster who ends up defeating Ogre. This shocks Demi and his other friends, who are also helpless since their hero had fallen. The wild monster seems to have pierced his skin and penetrated it with poison. This caused his body cells to die. After placing Ogre lifeless, Filippo rejoices, but his happiness is short-lived when he turns to look at Ogre's corpse and finds out that he has healed himself and is still alive, fully agile. Ogre attacks him with an ability that causes him to not be able to trace the enemy's movements. Despite this, he is still able to dodge a few attacks. At this point, he asks them to pause as they need to introduce themselves. Ogre declines, but he goes on ahead with the introduction. He had barely said his name when Ogre attacked him. In response to this, he quickly blocks the attack by unleashing his other powers. However, Ogre still manages to strip him naked from the stupid monster suit. Filippo ends up escaping naked as he runs off shamelessly. Ogre, who is not satisfied, promises to kill and eat the idiot one day. Following this, Nemi approaches and quickly flings herself in his arms, asking if he is okay. He hugs her and assures her of his safety. Following this, some human soldiers who are still alive tremble from seeing him, but he asks that they be spared and protected. He also tells Ogre-Kichi to try healing the injured ones. Meanwhile, at this time, he had sent out his created messenger that carried his traits to go and deliver the medicine to the head of the human fighters. On getting there, he tells the knight that the elves have no intention of prolonging the fight and also whispers that the medicine is available. After handing over the medicine to him, the messenger disappears. Following this, he sends out instructions immediately that they withdraw from the pointless fights as the medicine has already been found. After this, Ogre gathers all his dead and fallen heroes for burial. After paying their last respects and praying for them, they are cremated so that they do not turn zombies later. Everyone looks at the burning corpse with different feelings and thoughts in their heart charts. Some shed crocodile tears while Ogre just looks blank. He feels like he must survive just to keep them safe as he sees himself living for their sake. Having cremated their loved ones on day 84, Hobru, his supposed younger sibling, wakes him up very rudely in the morning. She rants on about how they had earned a lot of high-quality experience from the previous battle. While she drools as she says this, he finds it irritating and tells her to wipe her drools. Later that day, his male sibling, Hobri, who is now mostly seen as a powerful cleric, has been given a new outfit. With this, he tells Ogre about his new developments and how he has been healing injured people back in the cave. He had also evolved into a half-saint lord. He also picked up an interesting ability called the Barrier Light. It is powerful because it is durable enough to receive 20 shots of punch from Ogre. While Hobru keeps acting weird because of the stupid rotten monsters that she consumes, Ogre ignores her as she fantasizes about her male brothers, including Ogre-Kichi and himself. He bumps into Ham, who has numerous eyes all over her body. He gets irritated and tells her to close them. In response to this, she apologizes as she is not really skilled at controlling it yet. She is not very good at direct combat skills, and she has also become a Dodomeki. This is a race that excels in combat support using illusory magic. Ham is not the only one who has grown in strength and stature. Having more wheat goblins have evolved into ogres. The Cobloids have also improved, and their leader had already leveled up. Ogre gives him a new name, and then Gabji tells them to never share their real name with any entity. This is because the enemy can use their name to unleash different afflictions on them with weird spells. Having warned them, Ogre gathers everyone outside the cave and says he is ready to free all his prisoners provided they are interested in leaving. This annoys some of the elves, who think he sees the goblins to be more powerful and valuable, and instead of just shutting his trap, he challenges Ogre to a brawl with the agreement that the winner continues ruling in the forest. Seeing that the stupid elves have not learned their lesson, he agrees to this. They prepare to attack him, but he is quick to send them flying back with a single punch. Here, Haji is instructed to heal them. Just as he turns to address the rest of the people, another elf hits him off guard and this sends him flying into the woods, while the goblins become scared. However, as the elf rejoices over a single punch, Ogre comes out of nowhere and serves him a smack down his life. He almost goes lifeless, but is quickly revived. The last elf still finds it hard to accept Ogre as the boss, so he first promises to marry Demi after killing her ugly man. Seeing that the elf is being a pervert to his dear Demi, he gives him a special beating, and when he is close to death, he ends up treating him with his own blood. Having done this, the elf gets addicted to his blood and tries seducing Ogre. He finds this irritating, but to satisfy his desire, he beats him mercilessly and heals him again with blood. As for the wild monsters that were subdued, they refuse to fight or leave. Rather, they are grateful to Ogre for saving them and keeping them alive. With this, he appreciates their ability to be reasonable and treats them well. Following this, he looks into aspects where he can help their troop experience growth, especially the smithing and adventure aspect. Eartha finds a new treasure from the person returner had shown her, and to repay her good deeds, Ogre eats the gems and then acquires new skills. On the next day, while he is roaming the forest, he bumps into the naked girl who had taken his virginity a few days back. He had come to discuss something with her, but she is unable to ignore his 6-packs, so she pushes his back on the floor and flings herself on top of him. Having had a lot of fun in the forest and forgetting to clean the stain of kisses on his face, Demi sees this when he returns to the cave and promises with the other girls to make him pay dearly for his stupid actions. On the next morning, everyone was energetic as he now stationed them to work on the fields and also behind building a new place outside the cave so that they could occupy it. He also expands the hot springs and invites his elf friends to help spread the good news of their little resort center. He does not stop at this, as he creates a spider vehicle with skeleton bones and mana. This is to convey whoever is ready to the human world. Having conquered the humans, the king of the elves invites him to have fun with him at a festival that they observe every year. Here the princess gives them a special dance performance, and their relationship is further enhanced. When they return to the cave the next day, he shows them the spider carriage and also divides everyone into different groups to visit the outside world and gather all the knowledge possible while he is left in the cave that day. On the next day, he too sets out in his carriage with his human girls. He had promised to return them to their world from the very day they were captured, and he is now keeping this promise. He sets out for the city, unsure of what is to come next. 6 days after setting out of Kudal Woods, which makes the 102nd day of Ogre's birth, they finally arrived at their destination called Trient, the garrison city. In this city, demi-humans make up about 25% of the residential area and population. On getting to the town, they are transfixed on seeing that the humans have returned with a monster, and not just a monster, a goblin. They tell everyone to stand guard and also try to attack Ogre, but the girls are quick to stop them and explain that he had saved their lives. Following this, they go into the city and after much persuasion, they are let into the inn to lodge with Ogre. Having settled, he promises to let them off if they decide to stay in the city, but he decides to hang around in case things turn out well. Later that day, one of the girls shows him around the city, including the Adventurers Guild. Following this, people keep attacking him because they are either scared or alerted by his face and body features. Tired of all the harassment, he changes his form to fit into his body when he was still Kaneda in his former life, and then goes to the city himself to observe things. While he bids Demi a farewell for the main time, he roams the city and notices some bandits in an enclosed building. He walks into the place and when they try to hurt him, he takes them down in a jiffy. Meanwhile, as he turns to leave, he notices a new set of bandits who possess the same item he had retrieved from the previous men. They seem to have kidnapped the princess of the town and are now harassing her personal guard after giving them the required ransom. Following this, he beats them up and saves the little knight. However, instead of thanking him, he blames Ogre for letting them off as free men instead of killing them instantly. Feeling disrespected, he spanks the boy on the head and warns him to be grateful as he has his own reasons for not killing them. He then gives him his business card and tells him to reach out if he ever needs help. After revealing his true self and scaring the boy to death, he leaves the place. Later that night, the boy comes to look for him and then tells him about how the intrepid child princess sneaked out of the palace and then got kidnapped on his watch. Ogre then decides to help him as he has already located the hide of the kidnappers. They set out that night and end up attacking the bandits and retrieving the princess. In order to make him forget what had really happened with the kidnap story to save his job, he is hypnotized as Ogre leaves before the princess can wake up, and before he comes to his senses. On the following day, the rude, intrepid child princess storms their abode in the city, claiming to be grateful for his care and for saving her. Following this, she tries ordering him around and tells him to follow her to attend to a mission as her personal guard. After staring at the rude short idiot for a while, he shouts and declines her request rudely. Following this, she feels humiliated, but she tries to keep her steez. They later meet to have a proper discussion at a restaurant, where she explains the mission and the reward he is to get from it. Having been convinced to accept the offer because of the gigantic monetary reward, he sets out with his girls and the princess. However, on their journey to the place, she pulls up all sorts of crazy shit like using Ogre's shoulders as a seat all through the journey, scaring other people while they are chopping food ingredients with knives. Ogre scolds her a few times and even spanks her buttocks. Throughout the journey, he keeps killing every prey he finds, and they stop to cook and eat it. The first prey were buffaloes and then a rabbit and then eagles. However, they soon encounter the biggest threat. Ogre instructs everyone to stay in the carriage and not come out of it for any reason at all while he devours the wild animal.